Could AI be the ultimate insider threat? Like, not through hacking, but by misinterpreting or manipulating policies and hallucinating its way into admin access.
Yeah, I think it's not an if. This is an actual practical reality. Basically, like any other human, you provide entitlements to the human, right? Your rank and file IC engineer is going to have a very specific set of entitlements, what are called scopes, right? This is what you can get access to once you're in. Here's the things you can do in the system, and turn them into the Oprah moment. You get an API key. Now you before you know it, we have no governance or manageability over, oh my God, there has to be some level of governance over it,
Hey, it's Michael. If you've been on a Zoom with me lately, you'll notice that you have my full attention. It's because I'm not taking notes. Instead, I rely on Fellow, an AI meeting assistant, to take notes for me, along with tracking action items and decisions, handling recordings, transcripts, and summaries, all in one secure platform. It's kind of like magic. Built with security and privacy at its core, Fellow is the only AI meeting assistant that thousands of leaders and organizations trust to capture meeting notes and recordings while keeping your data safe. They're so confident that you'll love it, they're offering an insane deal to you all, Between Two COOs listeners. 90 days of unlimited AI-powered note-taking and recording completely free. Visit Fellow.ai/COO to sign up today and experience the AI meeting assistant trusted by leaders everywhere. Hello and welcome to Between Two COOs. I'm your host, Michael Koenig, and today I'm joined by an old friend, Greg Keller, co-founder and chief technology officer of JumpCloud. If you're not familiar, JumpCloud has become one of the fastest growing identity platforms out there, basically giving IT teams a modern alternative to the old Microsoft Active Directory. What started as a bet on making identity and access simpler has now scaled into a multi-billion-dollar company, securing thousands of organizations worldwide. Greg has been at the center of that journey, from scrappy founder days to now steering the company's technological vision at scale. We're going to dig into what a CTO actually does, how JumpCloud has navigated some of the biggest challenges in identity access management and security, and then take some left turns into the future and AI. Greg, great to have you here. Let's get right in.
To see you, and couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for that intro.
Oh, of course. So let's start off. First, this is a COO podcast, but I love having other functions on so that we can get a different perspective and appreciation. What does a CTO actually do? Just real quick.
Oh, we just, sit around and chase butterflies and think of, obscene visions to task our global engineering teams to go and execute on. I digress. It's a multitude of things, but I think in the core mission, we are the ones who are setting the tone and the tempo of where the company's puck is headed in terms of technology. So that is the foremost charter. There are different flavors and variants of CTOs. Some are deeply ensconced in engineering practices and rigor, and that's a part of it. But you find characters who kind of, accelerate in that way. Others are more customer-facing and product inclined, right? I tend to be on more of that side of the fence, which is, setting a kind of a precedent of the what and the why behind the company's product initiatives, and pulling the organization towards that mission. That's generally how at least my architecture of a CTO role needs to be at this company, but it may not apply for other companies.
And that's a little bit more difficult than the COO role, where we try and see around corners and position the company to mitigate risk, to be in a good growth path, but you have to see around corners on the tech stack itself. So there's actually a lot of work that goes into building the future. If you get it wrong, it could set you back a long time. How do you balance that? How do you see around those corners?
Yeah, it's, that was what we use that analogy, where the puck is headed. Huge Gretzky fan. It is, first of all, let me address all of these roles in senior leadership, with a C in front of it are, it's mind-bendingly hard. So you can't, the plight of the COO is absolutely, as you suggest, incredibly difficult. We each have our own challenges. I love your analogy of looking around corners. So on that front, what I need to do as the CTO is assure a continual kind of value chain that is uninterrupted and constantly is demonstrating progressivity, right? This is where, great companies kind of stagnate, plateau, and start their decline and their descent. And it's incredibly important that, for me personally, like trying to get my periscope and look around the corner, is literally about meeting needs and expectations before many of my customer, buyer ICPs, kind of think of it, right? What you don't want to be doing is being in chase mode all the time. That's a bad place to be. It's a tough place to be for, an inventor and, frankly, for our GTM teams, right? Then they turn into a bunch of folks who are constantly, doing the Coke versus Pepsi challenge, which is not uncommon, but what we want is to set the tone of this is something you haven't tasted before. And here's why you need to be in this taste test, right? Demonstrating a level of technology progression that you may not be familiar with, right? In these other vendors, these other approaches. Does that make sense? Like, to me,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
is bending of around the corner.
Got it. And because you brought up the taste challenge, Pepsi or Coke?
Oh, I have to say Pepsi. My brother, a senior guy at Pepsi for a billion years. So if I say Coke, it could probably.
So that's more out of loyalty than taste. Got it.
And this is also going to not get him or get him angry at me. I haven't actually had a soda pop in, I know this sounds crazy, in probably 20 years.
Good for you. Yeah, good for you. That's wonderful. Well, let's talk about JumpCloud, because identity access management, I've come across it a lot because I've been a heavily technical COO at points, but identity access management, I just said that and people's eyes glazed over. What is it? How does JumpCloud fit into this? And what are you guys doing differently than, say, an Okta?
Yeah, those are all questions, some very ethereal, some very specific. So for the let's call it the progressive COO who may not be ensconced or educated on these things, I'll boil it down like this. In a business of any kind, remote first, SaaS, highly progressive to very traditional, I walk into a brick and mortar office every day. In order for the worker to do their job, writ large, they need access to something to perform the task, right? It could be taking I'm in a retail store and taking your badge fob and getting into a point of sale machine. It could be I am a software engineer and I need to log into my services to work on cloud infrastructure. It could be I am a financial person who needs to sign into into NetSuite or, a large scale, transactional system. So jobs require, tooling and things that perform, help the human perform the job. All of them require access. In the broad spectrum of startups to multinational conglomerate, huge companies, there is a spectrum on the maturity of gaining access to resources. Okay. And that is another set of technologies. That is the world of identity and access management. So even in that acronym, IAM, it starts with the identity. You and me, Michael, we're just human knowledge workers. We're just part We're cogs in the business machine. We're the identities. The access part is what we need to get access to do our job. The M, our management part, is how do you on a continual basis manage the appropriate access and security into those things? That's the spectrum. Startups are typically very immature. Multinational conglomerates have purchased all the tools and all the magic of software and security things to do it safely, right? And there's a broad spectrum in between. So that's the education part, okay? That's the basis of the world that we live in at JumpCloud. Historically, this is not a new concept, okay? Companies, namely Microsoft, have offered and performed these duties in their software for many, many decades. In the case of Microsoft, truly launching this in the late 1990s, early 2000s, first with Windows NT, if you're old enough to remember that, then moving into Windows Server 2000. And many of us old enough to remember that, you were probably walking into an office. You sat at a cubicle, you had a big monitor on your desk, and below your desk, you had a tower, like literally your machine, which you would knock your knee into every time you rolled your chair on, at your cubicle. And all those machines were Etherneted in literally to a actual closet. And inside that closet was a rack of servers. This is how it was done for decades. And those servers would dictate when Michael Koenig would sign into a Windows machine and what Michael Koenig could actually get access to. Microsoft was very, very good at that for their own ecosystem of products, like SharePoint, like Outlook Exchange, which is their email client, like Windows servers where documents and files would be held, right? It was a very harmonious thing. Guess what? Things have changed. The last 3 companies I built didn't look anything like those companies in the 90s. I use a MacBook. I've been a proud Apple user for 20 years. Anything that I could put a credit card in to operate my business, like Google Apps, as it was called in the day, or Amazon to build my, infrastructure, or Salesforce, to run my, CRM, right? None of that looked like what Microsoft is doing. And yet it still had the same challenges, right? How do you securely get access to that wide variety of non-Microsoft stuff? Oh, and by the way, there may be Microsoft things in there. Like my finance people could not use MacBooks because they needed proper versions of Excel to do those big Excel things for finance reasons. So you got to manage Windows too. So real companies operate in a non-monoculture stack, in a very heterogeneous stack, using lots of different vendor resources. That was the problem that JumpCloud chose to solve, right? At different operating systems, different working behaviors, some remote, some in offices, some on-premise equipment, some up in the cloud services. You had to respond to all these things and provide an identity with that secure access, no matter what it was from where it was, okay? So that's what JumpCloud decided to do, very much, in contrast to Microsoft's dedication to their own software. Your last part was this company, Okta, a company that is, we have a lot of respect for. They, generate, publicly traded, generate, $1 billion plus in revenue, in actual revenue, large market capitalization. And it was demonstrative of how identity, at least one service aspect of it, needed to happen. And what that one service aspect was something called single sign-on, SSO. And it was a capability to secure and provide access to anything that a user would need to get access to through a browser, right? So think of Salesforce or any of the number of web-based applications that you use. they needed to go and solve that. And they were the ones who more or less disrupted that community. There were others that did it before them, like Ping Identity, another Colorado-based company. Okay. So they, in effect, demonstrated that, hey, we're going to go and reinvent this browser-based world of secure access. And guess what? It's a thing, right? What it didn't solve for, though, was the whole totality of things a user may be touching on a daily basis. Like, for example, Michael, before you got on this recording with me, you walked into your home office, you logged into your computer, probably a MacBook, right?
You got it.
Right? And you put your fingerprint down on that MacBook, maybe, to get biometrically to get into it, right? Then you need username and password into certain things like your Google thing. And then to get into this recording software, which is web or browser based, you needed another password for that. Okta is doing the password things for the browser based stuff, but who's working on the hardware or things that are on your laptop, or maybe you have a file server next to your desk, or all these different meaty things that we had to provide the total solution for, not just what they did, which we do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And yes, and the one of the main reasons, aside from you being an awesome person and I love chatting with you, but also one of the main reasons why I find this really pertinent to COOs is that a lot of us are looking at how do we integrate AI into our business stack, and
Yeah.
a lot of the answers here is it depends, because it depends on what the pipes are that's powering your data. And so with identity access management, this literally determines who has access to what and which identities speak and interact with your other ones. And it depends on whether or not, how much of that can be automated by your IT team. So to listeners, go talk to your IT team and ask them specifically, how labor intensive and manual is it to provision a new employee on their first day and then provision them to new software that's coming out? Because this is going to be a key part as to whether or not you can have AI enabled in your company in certain places.
Right.
So now that I touched on AI, what I'm really curious about is, how do you view AI and identity access management as kind of coinciding? No, that's not the word, but converging rather.
I think I'm going to answer that, but let me do a public service announcement for your COOs. All right. It's not a if, but when. Progressive COOs, CISOs, and then the subsequent IT leaders need to be on the same page on adoption of and aggressively using AI, lest your businesses fall off the back. All right. There is no question about the impact of AI in all nooks and crannies and corners of the business. All right. Again, I'm queuing on and pinning the IT related question, but it's in continuing the public service announcement. First and foremost, the COO needs to be challenging its employee base on what are you doing now in order to improve your job efficacy and efficiency by accelerating time motion, by using AI. First point. All right. Second point, that same COO needs to be pointed at the CISO saying, I have made a declaration as the chief operating officer to the company that we are going to get better and faster and more efficient and accurate using AI. CISO, what are you doing to support me on the mission to make it secure? Okay. So it absolutely is a function. We cannot hand sharpened scissors to every, mid-level manager and IC, the scissor being the AI component, and running down the hallway. You're going to get a lot of upset people tripping over their feet and cutting themselves, right? You have to do this responsibly. Case in chief, at the end of Q3 into Q4 of last year, Raj Bhargava, my co-founder and CEO, set the precedent. We are going to measure and start to evaluate each employee's utilization and business units' utilization of AI tooling. We laid the tools out on the table, many of them. We funded it. We evaluated the security of them all, which our CISO is amazing. He assigned his team to do all of this research, and we handed the tooling out. No excuses. Like, here it is. This isn't going to take your job. This is going to make you better. The results are bonkers. And in fact, you would imagine, the engineering is X% more efficient. Yeah, they are. You would not believe what it's doing to our GTM teams, our finance teams, name it. Of course, marketing. So that's the PSA part. Okay.
Right.
Get behind the initiative, do it safely and securely. Now, on the IT side, it is a function of evaluating, again, think efficiencies, but think security. Okay. And think the third component of this, which is it's not just about flesh and skin identities, humans. It is about synthetic identities. So what are synthetic identities? They're non-human. Every time you are interacting with a bot, an agentic bot, it's doing in many ways the role or the task of what you would typically call upon a human to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? Those same bots have access requests, right? So the number one thing a team needs to do is, what are the agents coming into my business? What are the ones going out from the business? And reassessing, what do they have access to in either direction, right? Does the bot responding to our customers, maybe through a customer chat vehicle, is it confined to only, the data set related to that customer? So there's no permeation or commingling any other data. How do you control that? Same thing in that. You and your COOs are going to start to hear acronyms like MCP, Model Context Protocol. It's just, frankly, a front door. Think of it as a front door API stack that lets agentic bots talk to your infrastructure. Same thing. What does that thing have access to? What are swim lanes and bumper guards you're going to give agentic bots access to? Because the end result, either A, with good bumper guards, is amazingly productive for external services to go and work with your service very seamlessly. The efficiencies. The bad side of that coin is the agentic bots start to learn APIs about your infrastructure, and it is making assumptions on what it thinks it can do to solve a problem that, was tasked to it. All right. So it all comes down to appropriate access controls, IAM, into infrastructure or other services within your environment. Right. So it's a big, big part of it's, think of it as this space is changing. It's changing every month. Frankly, every other week, there's an advancement. It's happening that fast. So, companies like ours are on the forefront of working to solve those problems.
Yeah. And I love this because you just answered three more of my questions, which was posing whether or not there's going to be a shift towards a humanless directory where AI agents and devices outnumber people and identities. But also, this next one, for listeners, we have a shortened recording session today because everything's going nuts on Greg's end in a good way. And so
keep driving. Yeah.
Cool. Well, two questions left here then. The first, and this is just more of a thought process, and again, this may cause listeners' eyes to glaze over, but I'm really curious about what you think here. Could AI be the ultimate insider threat? Like, not through hacking, but by misinterpreting or manipulating policies and hallucinating its way into admin access?
Yeah, I think it's not an if. This is an actual practical reality. And, with it, again, I'll promise the COO's eyes will not super glaze over. I'm going to use some technical terms, but basically, like any other human, you provide entitlements to the human, right? Your rank and file IC engineer is going to have a very specific set of entitlements, what are called scopes, right? This is what you can get access to once you're in. Here's the things you can do in the system. Okay. A lot of that is happening now on the agentic side. And the reason for that is many of these AI-based systems still leverage API keys instead of tokens. Token, widely regarded as, in some cases, not all cases, but more progressive because you can control them, time them out. They're just more manageable in many ways. And the rigor around API keys, which are an older manifestation of, kind of a secret, a password, right? They're often, there's no timeout for them. There's also not a lot of granularity in, what the API key when assigned to something can do. It's either you're like read only, like you can do it, nothing, but you can see things, right? So there is, I think, a maturity level that has to happen, so that, we don't turn our teams who are not building, but rather, deploying API systems and turn them into the Oprah moment. You get an API key. Now you before you know it, we have no governance or manageability over, oh my God, like, who was the service account? What was the service account that was assigned to this API key that we gave to the thing, and what were its entitlements and scope and range of, you know what I mean? So, again, in the spirit of moving fast and everyone's excited to, leverage the AI, there has to be some level of governance over it,
Yeah. And it's such a fine line between finding that balance of not too much restriction, but just enough.
You're right. Right.
Greg, because you just offered for a few more minutes, it's time for my last favorite question. We've all had those moments in the executive seat where we've seen something just totally crazy and thought to ourselves, I never thought I'd see that. Do you have one you can share?
Oh, Michael, that is the threshold question. Yeah, you got me on the spot here. All right, so I guess 32 years in industry. At this point, I've seen a ton. I've entered the workforce when it was still very, very much like how things had been done, decades and decades prior. There was no email or anything. The internet wasn't a thing when I joined the workforce. It was, very analog in that way. So you may think that my knee-jerk response is, well, I never thought that I'd see, software write emails for me and, do my job so I can sit back and be brain dead. No. By the way, I'm still waiting for my jetpack, as I was promised in the 70s as a child. So 100%, the software aspect doesn't, surprise me. You know what? I'm going to actually put a kind of a meaningful twist on this. You know what does surprise me? It is our nation's inability to heal and cure itself and galvanize itself in order to be the absolutely best luminary nation on earth progressively. I'll stick to the software and technology vein. And, we have given birth to many of the, if not, the majority of the world's most progressive technology inventions. And we are not, capable enough to see or otherwise respond to many of the global moves happening in order to protect our interests as, the most progressively technologically innovative nation state on earth. I would challenge everybody to understand the following fact. I travel the globe multiple times a year, and sitting in an office in Kuala Lumpur with some of the most amazing software engineers that I've ever seen, and they have aggressive startup culture, and they want to change the world. How do we get that mojo back? That was the mojo that built this amazing country. And how do we really look at ourselves and say, we can get back to that place? We can get back to that place. So there you go. That is one thing that, as a child growing up in the 70s and 80s, when you have this flag waving Americana and, we're just the best. Well, guess what? Right now, there is a two-man team in Pune, India, or Jakarta, or in Curitiba, Brazil, that have the tooling, the capability, the knowledge, and most importantly, the motivation to go and build the next trillion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar company. Like that, I think, is what I never expected.
Well, it turns out that we actually had some technical difficulties there at the end. The good news is that was the last question, so we're actually totally fine. A big thank you to Greg Keller for joining me. I loved this week's episode, and a big thank you to you all for listening and watching. Tune in next time for our next COO chat, and until then, so long.